Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Kev Silk. I'm a product manager at Ankr, and I've been passionate about the blockchain space for almost 2 years now. And to be transparent, I'm quite shocked to even be given a speech up here at Messari. In fact, it's funny. I was talking to my younger sister the other day, who knows nothing about blockchain, and told her that I was giving a speech at Messari next week, and she said, "Is that Bitcoin stuff you do?" And I didn't even try to correct her. I just said, "Yeah, sure." But like all younger sisters try to boost the confidence of their older brothers, she also responded by saying, "I wonder why they chose you." But to be honest, I don't blame her, because to think 2 years ago if someone told me I'd be giving a speech here, I would have said they were crazy. But that's what's unique about our industry here and Messari as well. I mean, when you come to these types of events, everyone has different backgrounds, different cultures, different industries. But we all have one common interest, right? And that's about Web3. So I'm thrilled to be here and excited to talk to you all about AppChains. But before I dive into what AppChains or application-specific blockchains are, I think it's critical to provide as much context as possible and really provide the why before the what. And what I mean by that is, why is something important to me before I understand what it actually is and what problem it's solving for? So what I want to do is really start at the absolute basic and at the top, and that's the internet, right? What is it, and how does it function? Well, it's what allows us to connect with our friends, to shop, to listen to music, to get to place A to place B, to work. Our entire society is dependent upon the internet. But how does it function, right? How does the infrastructure that basically supercharges our everyday lives actually work? And I'm sure that there's some people in here that could tell me how long lines of code turn into beautiful interfaces, or how fiber optic cables send data across the world at the speed of light. But for a lot of us, we don't really know how the internet works. And in fact, there was a poll from techrepublic.com that asked 1,000 Americans if they knew how the internet functioned. And 86% of them said they knew. But when they asked to explain it themselves, only 66% of people could actually explain how it worked. So what does this tell us? That we're not quite as intelligent as we think we are? Maybe. Or what's critical is that how the internet functions doesn't really matter. It just needs to function. And it needs to function seamlessly. And over time, as the internet's evolved, developers have evolved with it. And they've been able to create applications that work so seamlessly that people don't have to know how the internet works. They just need to know how to use the application. And this is possible because the infrastructure that we've created have empowered developers to reach their full potential. And this infrastructure includes easy-to-use developer tools, programming languages, frameworks. A builder of any kind, whether it's a decentralized application, whether it's a plane, a high-rise building in New York City, a train, any kind of builder is only as valuable as the infrastructure allows them to be. And so you're probably wondering, okay, what does this have to do with AppChains? Well, that's because application-specific blockchains are the infrastructure solution that will enhance Web3 builders to reach their full potential and create decentralized applications with a better user experience than Web 2, and will bring in the next 2 billion consumers into Web 3. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. But before we dive into the current building infrastructure and application-specific blockchains, being at Messari, I think it's reasonable that we start with a quote and take a look at the current market. Now, Web3 is inevitable, and its benefits are undeniable. And this is a quote from Messari's thesis back in January, and I couldn't agree more. These benefits include things like peer-to-peer transactions, trustless systems, immutable ownership, greater privacy, and security over our data, right? And Web3 consumers have been able to utilize these benefits right now, but there's a whole bunch of people who are still utilizing centralized applications that are waiting for these benefits to come to full fruition. Now, with that being said, we have some of the most talented developers in the world building decentralized applications, right? And they're working incredibly hard right now. This is an exciting time because although the US dollar prices of our industry and many of the crypto assets in here have stabilized, the fundamentals of Web3 are strong as ever. And builders are working incredibly hard. Right now, they're building the decentralized applications that we will soon come to know and love. And the user experience, like I had mentioned, will be better than that of Web 2. Now, I don't just want to say all of this and not provide clear-cut data behind it. And being at Ankr, we're a Web3 infrastructure provider. So we have a unique insight into the state of development of Web3. And what we've seen alone over the last year, just from straight builder statistics, is quite remarkable. Over the last year, we've seen an increase in our RPC traffic up over 2,000%. We're averaging nearly 7.2 billion RPC requests, and we're servicing over 70,000 individual developers. And I'm not just saying this to pump the tires of Ankr. I'm more showing this to validate that builders are building right now. And it's an exciting time because the best projects get built in a bear market. Now, why am I showing you this? Because, like I had mentioned, builders can only reach their full potential if the infrastructure allows them to do it. So with that being said, I think it's quite imperative, before we dive into what application-specific blockchains are, to take a look at the current infrastructure that Web3 developers have at their disposal right now. Mainly, developers have three options, right? They can build on a public layer 1 or a public layer 2. Now, of course, these are incredible projects, right? This is the reason why we're all here. These are exciting projects that are providing incredible value to developers and consumers. But blockchain technology in and of itself has some limitations, right? Each blockchain has only one mempool, right? And a mempool is where developers send their requests for RPC nodes to go and service them, right? This results in some congestion that can occur within public blockchains, whether it's an L1 or an L2. Developers are competing for traffic with other developers who are building their own applications. There's a lack of customizability when building on a public blockchain. And what that means is a developer has to abide by the specific consensus mechanisms, programming languages, and frameworks of that specific public blockchain. Ultimately, what occurs here is a lack of scalability. Developers have a difficult time scaling their projects when network congestion gets very high. These are things that Web 2 consumers aren't used to. They're not used to having to pay high gas fees or have a transaction take 5 to 10 minutes. The other option that developers have is they can build their own blockchain from scratch. Now, there might be some large Web 2 organizations that have the ability, the time, and the resources to be able to do this, but for the most part, developers just don't have the ability to build the infrastructure that actually powers their application. And to be honest, they shouldn't have to. They should be focused on their applications and building them to the best of their ability. So, with that being said, what does this mean for the industry as a whole? Well, the current developer options, it leaves Web 2 consumers in Web 2. And this is the point of application-specific blockchains. In order for us to fully adopt Web 3, we have to bring in the next 2 billion users, and those 2 billion users are coming from Web 2. They're the consumers who are utilizing Web2 applications but are investing in crypto assets just based through speculation. I'm a big believer in learning through experience. And what I mean by that is, in order to truly learn the value of something, you have to actually use it. You have to know the pros and cons of it. Basically, you have to see both sides of the argument and make your own decision on whether or not you find it to be valuable or not. Only with genuine usability will our market stabilize eventually. With all this being said, we need to empower developers to reach their full potential. And we need to provide them with the tools, the resources, and the infrastructure to create those decentralized applications with a better user experience than Web 2. Mainly, how we do that is by two key ways. We allow developers to build comfortably. And what do I mean by that? We empower developers to be able to utilize their own skills that they're comfortable with, their preferred languages, frameworks, easy-to-use developer tools. The other thing is to provide them with dedicated blockchain infrastructure. One chain for one application. This will remove the congestion that can sometimes make Web3 a little bit slower and expensive. It will provide one mempool for one application to be able to easily grow, scale, and meet their overall business objectives. Be able to cover their expenses, see a clear-cut ROI on their applications. Increase their TVL, increase their daily active users and total monthly users. How we do that is through an application-specific blockchain. And an application-specific blockchain is exactly what it sounds like. It's one blockchain for one application. Now, I myself am a visual learner, and I think that this image up here paints the picture of an app chain in the best way possible. Of course, when you're building on a public blockchain, you're competing for traffic with other developers. And those other developers could be building any type of application, an NFT marketplace, a DeFi protocol, a Web3 game, anything at all. And when one of these applications gains a lot of attraction and takes up a lot of the network congestion, this hinders the other abilities for the developers to grow and scale their own blockchain. But with an application-specific chain, they're able to capture all of the resources that they have within that blockchain. And we've seen some public blockchains be able to offer these application-specific blockchains right now. These mother chains include Polygon, Binance Smart Chain, Cosmos, and Avalanche. And basically, these application-specific chains, they act like child chains to the mother chain. And unfortunately, they didn't make it easy for us, and they all have decided to call these app chains or application-specific blockchains by their own names. Polygon calls them supernets, Binance calls them sidechains, Cosmos calls them zones, Avalanche calls them subnets, but ultimately they mean the same thing. Now, being in New York City, I thought a good analogy to describe an app chain and a public blockchain would be by comparing them to cities and districts or zones or boroughs, right? So for you to look at New York City, right, you could look at New York City as a public blockchain. And there's 5 boroughs of New York City, obviously, and each of these boroughs could be considered an app chain. Each of them have their own citizens, their own businesses, their own value that they're contributing to New York City itself. And the more value these app chains have, or the boroughs of New York City, the more valuable the mother chain becomes, or New York City itself. This is the best way to look at it because when you think about an application-specific blockchain, they're generating their own revenue. They're generating their own consumers. And the more consumers that they have, this enables the developers to continue to have better infrastructure to build their blockchain. Not only does this capture more consumers to want to actually utilize mother chains and their app chains, it will attract more developers. Because competition is everything, right? So if developers see that there's another competing developer project who has their own dedicated blockchain infrastructure, they will be more likely to want the same thing for themselves. So it's a two-way street. Now, when it comes to actual infrastructure of a blockchain, there's 5 key components, right? There's RPC nodes, as I had mentioned, and they communicate the developer to the chain, and they store read-write data. There's validator nodes, and these validator nodes, of course, process transactions, and they add new chains to the block. Now, the other 3 things are critical as well. A block explorer, which generates the true transparency and openness of a blockchain. It allows consumers or users or developers to be able to view the latest transactions and all the lists of validators and their own data points. There's also a testnet, which allows the developer to launch their application as a demo first to test it out, and a faucet for testnet tokens, which will allow consumers to have testnet tokens to test the demo. And lastly, there's a staking UI. And this staking UI is what allows the token holders of the app chain to be able to stake their assets, contribute to the decentralization and the security of the app chain's ecosystem. And this is where Ankr comes into play here. Because regardless of what mother chain that a developer chooses to build on, Ankr plugs in and provides the infrastructure for the developer themselves so that they don't have to do it themselves. And of course, there's not a one-size-fits-all solution for developers. Every developer is different, right? They have their own skills, their own areas of opportunity, their own timelines, goals, business objectives. They have their own programming languages that they want to write in. So Ankr builds the blockchain, regardless of the mother chain, that's specific to the developer's needs. In other words, they tell us the specs that they want the blockchain in, and we build it for them. Now, obviously, being at an infrastructure provider, my first thought process is to the benefits of a developer, right? So what specific developers and what specific benefits can they receive from this app chain, right? Mainly, there's 3 components. There's streamline building, customizability, and scalability. So let's start with streamline building. As I had mentioned, those 5 key infrastructure components are critical to a developer. With that being at their hands, at their disposal immediately, they're able to reach their full potential. As I had mentioned, a developer can only reach their full potential as the infrastructure allows them to do so. And that's why Ankr's passionate about providing them the ability to do so. With this own dedicated infrastructure, it will remove the congestion from public networks as we know. It will allow the developer to build, grow, and scale quick. It will attract consumers. Specifically, the better the application becomes and the better the user experience becomes, the more attractable this app chain and the mother chain will be for those Web2 consumers. And they will be more likely to actually want to utilize it and learn through experience rather than just invest in it and hope that it goes to the moon, right? It empowers developers with enhanced scalability and customizable features. So when we think about enhanced scalability, what this allows the developer to do is, of course, process transactions super quick, right? With network congestion coming down, now developers can process transactions quickly, efficiently, and securely. They can also control the gas fees. They can have always 0 or low gas fees if they want. They can have a gas token and an in-game token. It's entirely customizable, which empowers them to truly scale their applications. And then, of course, the customizable features. They'll be able to have their own consensus mechanisms, their own programming languages. It's entirely up to them. In fact, I was talking to a developer the other day who's building a Web3 gaming project, and he kept asking me all these questions about the customizability component. Okay, well, how many validators can I have? Well, we recommend, bare minimum 6, just for true decentralization, but you can have as many as you'd want. Then they asked, well, can we run some and you can run some and we can decentralize the others? Of course. In fact, he actually had an idea where this game was a Web3 game where teams fight against each other, and he wanted to know if there was a group of validators who are actually playing the game and they're fighting a different group and they lose, if the other team that beats them can ultimately just take over their validator set and run it themselves. And I said, I don't necessarily know or think that's a good idea, but if you want to actually implement that in the code system, then yeah, sure, go for it. It's entirely up to the developer. And that's what they want. They want the freedom to be able to do what they want. They want to think outside of the box. And that's what we want to empower them to do. Now, alongside of actually embracing and empowering developers to reach their full potential, it's critical to improve the user experience of decentralized applications. And that's what application-specific blockchains empower developers to do. Again, it's extremely fast, responsive, decentralized applications, and it's interoperability with the mother chain, and this is crucial. What this means is if a developer wants to build on a Binance Smart Chain sidechain or a Polygon supernet, and they build that supernet or that sidechain, they have access to the liquidity of Binance and Polygon. They have access to the other decentralized applications that are being built on them. And this is what they want. They want that interoperability. And again, they can have whatever the gas fees they want them to be. Always zero or low. They can also take a percentage of the gas fees themselves. But like I mentioned, only with genuine usability will the crypto market truly stabilize. And by improving the user experience to that of Web2 user experiences, then we'll be able to do so. So what industries can benefit from this? Any industry that wants to utilize blockchain, right? Traditional Web3 industries like Web3 gaming, NFT marketplaces, virtual worlds, decentralized applications. These are all application-specific blockchains that Ankr's working with right now to help them reach their true business goals. And there's also traditional industries, right? Sports, fashion, music, supply chain, automotive. We've already seen some of these industries move into Web3, and eventually, with the amount of transactions that they'll have to process, they will need their own dedicated blockchain infrastructure. And not only that, what Ankr can do and what the other mother chains are starting to offer is the idea of a permissioned app chain, essentially allowing the developer to choose who has the access to enter their decentralized application. It provides more security and privacy, and there are some industries that will want that type of security. Now, the main industry that we've seen right now is Web3 gaming, right? Web3 games have to process an immense amount of transactions. And this is where an app chain suits them perfectly because it allows them to do so. And Ankr actually launched the first BNB sidechain called MetaApes just this last spring. And basically, it's one game for MetaApes and one chain for MetaApes. And just to give some quick context, MetaApes was a Web2 organization that was looking to move into the Web3 space and really take advantage of that play-to-earn model. But because they were in Web2, they didn't understand what they needed to do to actually take advantage of this opportunity, right? It was a massive learning curve for them. Do they either learn it themselves? Do they hire blockchain engineers? Do they hire more resources? Basically, they didn't know what they didn't know. But they knew that there was an opportunity for them waiting. So what they did was utilize Ankr's app chain infrastructure to build their block explorer, their staking UI, their testnet, their RPC nodes, their validator nodes, and this allowed them to easily move into the Web3 space. They also utilized two different types of assets, a gas token and an in-game asset. Now, what's unique about MetaApes is that they don't force users to actually utilize the blockchain component of the game, right? They have a massive audience that they wanted to begin introducing to blockchain, but they didn't want to lose that audience. They didn't want to force them into it. So basically, they're taking a walk versus run approach to bring these Web2 consumers into Web3, which is what I truly believe will allow the true mass adoption of Web3 to occur. So what happens is users can play MetaApes, and they don't have to actually tokenize all of their assets. But if they do want to, and they see other players are benefiting from it, then there's an education curve that MetaApes actually introduces their consumers to getting a MetaMask wallet, introducing them to gas fees and transactions and what actually occurs on the blockchain. But ultimately, the goal and what MetaApes is working on and what other AppChains are working on is to get to the point where consumers can utilize blockchain applications but not have to know how the blockchain functions. Just like 66% of 1,000 US Americans that were surveyed didn't know how the internet functions. That's the goal with application-specific blockchains, is to get to that user experience that is as seamless as possible. Now, the idea of AppChains is critical for those traditional enterprises moving into Web3. And what we've seen at Ankr is big interest from banks that are looking to move into Web3. But of course, they will need some security. They'll need some privacy or permission to enter. And that's what they're interested in. And there's numerous use cases for them to be able to utilize a permissioned Ankr app chain. Whether that's 401ks, being able to increase the yields that people can earn, right? Fiat on-ramps, stablecoins, staking yields. These are all use cases that they can benefit from. And this is what will bring that next 2 billion users into Web3. Getting people to take ownership over their assets and utilize the blockchain is what will contribute to Web3 mass adoption. And this is the big picture, right? By embracing that there are some limitations of blockchain technology, realizing that it's an issue, and then enhancing the developer building experience, it's a domino effect. Because by enhancing the developer experience, we will increase the quality and the user experience of Web3 applications. And by doing that, people will begin to learn through experience and actually utilize these dApps, right? And when people utilize these dApps, they'll realize which ones they value, which ones they don't value. This will decrease crypto speculative investing and ultimately increase Web3's mass adoption. Now, if you are building an app chain, if you're a developer, if you're building on a public blockchain, and you're curious to learn more about dedicated blockchain infrastructure, I'll be here till tomorrow. Ankr will be here till Friday. Please feel free to reach out to us on Telegram or any other social channel. We're happy to help. But thank you all for joining so much. I really appreciate it.